1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, we're going to, in general,
I'm trying to figure out what the time it is.
What time is it?
Wait, what are you figuring out?
Trying to figure out what time it is.
It's time for...
Gezintahait.
Hey, kids, what time is it? Time for Gezintahait, correct. Thank you very much, Gamal. I think I'm getting older and my brain is not working as well as it used to.
Well, then if that's the case, you should try this new system I'm learning from Betzalel.
All right. The first verse of the Torah, Gimel Aleph, what's the first verse of the Torah?
Well, the first voice is Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim ve'es ha'aretz.
Very correct. In the beginning, Hashem created the heaven and the earth. And Rashi asks a question right away. Rashi explains the Torah for a 5-year-old. Only question a 5-year-old would have, he tries to answer it. And Rashi asks a question. The Torah is a book of laws and ethics. So why does it start with a history? That's Rashi's question. Rashi says, the reason the Torah starts with the creation of the world by Hashem is when the people of the world come to you and say, you have stolen the land of Israel from the non-Jews, you will answer them that Hashem created the world and he owns the world and he can give it to whoever he wants. And he gave the land of Israel to the children of Israel. And that's why the Torah starts with, in the beginning, God created the heaven and earth, to let you know that the heaven and earth is his. Our Rebbe asked a question. You mean the whole Torah, the beginning of the Torah, is about a conversation with a non-Jew? That's a mind blower. So he says that Rashi says that Hashem says, I give you the inheritance of the nations. And that means the land of Israel. And when we listen to the complaint of the non-Jew, and we answer his complaint, and we tell him that the world was created by Hashem and he gives it to whoever he wants, it's not just we're having a conversation. We are acquiring the land. We're making a kinyan. We're actually acquiring the land of Israel. We're taking out that spark of good that had fallen and become mixed with the outside forces. And that's the reason why the Torah tells us to speak to this non-Jew, not to have a conversation with him. Because when we tell him that the land is ours because God, who the creator of the universe, gave it to us, we are actually acquiring the land. And that's the spark of good that had been mixed up with the other sparks. Now, in conflict resolution, you always try to find a way where it's a win-win. We are acquiring the land from the non-Jews. So what do they get out of it? And what they get out of it, their financial standing is going to be much, much bigger from the fact that Israel is ours. And their honor among the nations, their political stature is going to be much bigger. And that's what they get out of it. And what we get out of it is everybody agrees that it's our land. We want Mashiach now. Any questions on that one? Well, if not, let's have a niggun.
Yeah, how about the niggun? We do the niggun l'shabbos Yom Tov, or we do the fast one first? No, fast one first. Oh, we can do this other one.
We can do it. ولا شنيهم بصدر بشفيلي.
Okay, we'll do this. We'll do a favorite one first, and then next we'll have a great.
Next we'll have Gidon.
Ready?
First we'll have a regular niggun. Hey! Oh! Nice. Thank you very much. Now, the reason why we do this show is because the Rebbe said that as a help to bring Mashiach and prepare the world for Mashiach, we should make happy gatherings. And in those happy gatherings, we should say words of Chassidus. So these happy gatherings in order to hasten the coming of Mashiach. So therefore, as part of the Farbrengen, I want to sing one of my versions of Ad Mosai. Everybody knows when already is Mashiach going to come. And we're all supposed to express that. And I have my own way of expressing. If the mikveh was mashka, and I was a duck, I swim to the bottom and I never come up. Tell me how long do I have to wait? Can I get Mashiach now, or must I hesitate? The mikveh not mashka, and I'm not a duck. When I swam to the bottom, I was swimming up. Tell me how long do I have to wait? Can I get Mashiach now, or must I hesitate? Like Shua says, Ad Mosai. Let's see, let's think of the rest of it. Merciful King, all the work is done. Don't you think it's time we can have some fun? Tell me how long Do I have to wait? Can I get Mashiach now? Or must I hesitate? Averster, I ain't lying. The people down here that are sick and dying. Tell me how long do I have to wait? Can I get Mashiach now? Or must I hesitate? Now come on, children.
Come on, children.
We're gonna have some fun.
We're gonna have some fun.
You ain't seen nothing like the Holy One. Tell me how long do I have to wait? Can I get Mashiach now? Or must I hesitate? Thank you for your patience.
All right, Bezalel, very groovy.
Very groovy. Okay, now I'm going to put up a document up here on the screen. Let's see if I can get it up here. Yeah. Now, Gimel Elef.
Yeah.
Last week, we spoke about the concept of depth in the intellect. And what we explained was that the depth of Chachma is the opening of the mind to be able to receive from the Chachma generator. Chachma meaning the essence of the idea before it can be dressed in words and letters of explanation. It's called the flash that comes into the brain. But the depth of Chachma is before there's a flash. It's only the opening of the mind to be able to receive. Do you remember that?
Bezalel, I remember that part where it
Right.
comes into the mind, the first into the brain as an idea.
Remember, there's the right brain, the Chachma brain.
Yeah,
Left
so-
brain, the Bina brain, the back brain, the Das brain, and a membrane on top.
That's the
And
koyach.
on top of that is the Chachma generator. And in order to receive the Chachma, I have to open my brain to be able to receive. I have to say what?
You have to have a nothing.
Now, tonight, we're going to explain the width of Chachma. That was the depth of Chachma. It was not a Chachma at all. It was just an opening of the mind to be able to receive. The width of Chachma is going to be the actual Chachma that comes into the brain. And where it's going to come in is into the right brain, into the Chachma brain, which is a vessel for the idea, for the Chachma. And it's called the width of Chachma, as opposed to the depth, which is called the Rochav of Chachma. And that's the actual outflow of the idea as it becomes revealed out of its source. You okay with that? The Chachma comes into the brain as a revealed idea. That's called the width of Chachma, or the Chachma of Chachma. Like when an underground spring bubbles up out of the ground. Before it bubbled out, it was hidden. Now you have a revealed spring. That's going to be like the flash of Chachma in the brain. And that's going to be called the width of Chachma, or the Chachma of Chachma. Or like the example of a spark which flashes into the mind. And that's called the width of Chachma, or the revealed Chachma. And more precisely, it's designated as the Chachma of Chachma. As opposed, what we learned before, the depth of Chachma, which is called the crown of Chachma.
Now, this depth of Chachma, this is the same as the nothing of Chachma? Like you said?
Yeah, it's like the opening of the mind.
Yeah.
And that's called the crown of Chachma, because it's not an actual Chachma. It's the opening to be able to receive the Chachma. We said before that the revealed idea, which we're calling Chachma, is the Yud of Chachma. I'm going to see if I can share this over here. Do you see that Yud Kei Vav Kei on the screen?
Not yet. I see
Not
just.
yet. Hang on.
Okay. Now I see it, but it looks like you.
Okay, now you should see you.
Yeah, now it's there.
So Chochmah is symbolized by a yud. You see this small letter all the way on the right-hand side? So the idea is symbolized by this letter yud. Are you okay with that, Gimel Aleph?
Yeah, I'm okay with
The
it.
yud up on the screen? Now that yud has three parts to it. It has the thorn on top, like that little cap on top. And that's going to symbolize the depth of Chachma, the opening of the mind to receive the Chachma. And then it has the wide part, which symbolizes what we're talking about now, the width of Chachma, the flash as it comes into the brain. And then it has a little leg that comes down, which symbolizes the length of Chachma, which is going to be the thing called the Bina of Chachma. Wait, what happened to our document here? Okay. So looking at the yud in its detailed parts, we see there's three parts in the yud. There's the thorn on top, then the wide part, and then the leg that comes down. The thorn, which is the crown, symbolizes the depth of Chachma that we spoke about last week. Right, Gimel? We spoke about the depth of Chachma. And the wide part of the yud.
Yeah, the last time we spoke about the depth.
Right. And the wide part of the yud symbolizes the width of Chachma, how the Chachma flashes into the brain, which is the revealed Chachma. And the leg coming down symbolizes the length of Chachma, which is the Bina of Chachma. And that length of Chachma called Bina of Chachma, it's not an actual explanation. It's not a Bina yet. It's not an explanation yet. But it is the ability of Chachma to explain itself into a Bina. Chachma is higher than words and letters of explanation, but it has the ability to explain itself in words and letters. And that will be called the Bina of Chachma. Are you okay with that, Gimel?
Yeah, B'Tzalel, it's interesting that this little letter, it's not just makes a noise, but it actually, it's when it represents the Chachma, it's also shaped like the Chachma.
Yeah, it's a very serious deal, these letters. Now, Bina, which is an explanation, is the dynamic of descriptions and explanations. Remember, it's in words and letters. Chachma is higher than words and letters. It's just the idea itself. And the potential to bring these explanations in a way of expansion into an understanding, in the explanation of Bina, is that power of the length of Chachma called Bina of Chachma. Like it says in Sefer Yetzirah, it's called Haven b'Chachma, to understand with Chachma. Okay, so that is the depth and the width of Chachma. Now we're going to look at the length of Chachma, which is the Bina of Chachma.
So just to recap then, the depth is how the Chachma opens itself to receive from the Chachma generator.
Right.
And then the width is the actual coming out, the actual flash in the brain of the Chachma.
Right, the actual idea as it flashes in, before it's stressed in words and letters of explanation.
Okay, and now we'll talk about the length.
Now there's the length of Chachma, and it's called the Bina of Chachma. It's not an actual explanation, which is called a Bina, but it's the power that Chachma has to explain itself. And it's symbolized by the bottom leg of the Yud. Like we showed you, the Yud has a leg that comes down. The letter Yud in general symbolizes Chachma. And on a more specific level, the lower leg of the Yud symbolizes Bina of Chachma. which is the potential to draw down this idea into an explanation, into a tangible explanation in words and letters. And the source, and this is important, the source of this length of Chachma, called Bina Chachma, is higher than the body of the letter Yud. The source of the leg that comes down is higher than the wide part. The source of the leg that comes down is higher than the flash of the idea in the brain.
Well, where is the source of it?
Its source is in the thorn on top of the Yud. Like when you write a Yud, where do you start? You start with that thorn, and then you make the wide thing, and then you make the leg. So the source of the leg is in the thorn. It's in the crown. It's in the depth of the Chachma, the source of the coming down.
So does this mean that the deeper it is, the more better it will be able to come down?
That's what he's going to say, that the more nullified one is to be able to receive the Chachma, that's how much he'll be nullified to be able to give over the idea into an explanation. It's exactly what you said.
So this is like, it's like the idea that the best commander is made out of the best follower, makes the best leader.
Something like that. I never heard it expressed just like that, but that's exactly what we're talking about. Meaning that the source of this leg of Chachma, this Bina of Chachma, the length of Chachma, the ability to explain the idea, is the Kesser of Chachma. The source of the ability to explain is in the depth of the Chachma, which is higher than Chachma, which is higher than the flesh, which is higher than the actual Chachma. It's just a nullification to be able to receive. The reason the Bina of Chachma has its source higher than Chachma of Chachma is because proportional to the depth, according to how nullified one is to be able to receive, which is the emptying of the vessel of the mind in preparation of receiving the wisdom from the Koach HaMaskil, from the Chachma generator, which is the hidden level that generates this Chachma, is nullified of self as a preparation of bringing the Chachma into an explanation of Bina. In other words, in order to nullify, to receive, and according to the depth of how much one is nullified to receive, will be how much he'll be able to nullify himself to give. Like we said, the teacher nullifies himself and able to be give over. So according to the level of how he nullifies himself to higher than him, that's how much he'll be nullified to give. And that is this length of Chachma, which is the nullification to give over to an explanation of Bina. Therefore, in the days of Moshe Rabbeinu, Olav Shalom, there were a lot of Chachamim. They received the Torah. They had the wide part of the Yud. But their level was only that of the cap of the Yud, the Chachma of Chachma, the wide part. But there's a kind of a guy called a Navon. This is a kind of guy who could bring it down and explain it. Navonim, this power of Bina of Chachma, could not be found. They had a lot of Chachamim. They received the Torah. But there was not a lot of people. They couldn't find one who was able to bring it down and give it over. Why? Because the power to bring down new Chachma into Bina is a higher power than Chachma itself. The power of bringing down through nullification is higher than the flash of Chachma itself. There's the flash of Chachma, and then there's the ability to bring it down into an explanation, which is really higher than the flash itself. Its source is higher than the flash itself. Its source is in the depth and the kesser. because the source of Havin b'Chachma, the source of this Bina b'Chachma, the length of Chachma, to bring it down, which is called the length of Chachma, is in the depth of Chachma. Like we said, that according to how nullified one is to be able to receive, that will be his ability to nullify himself to be able to give over. And that depth of Chachma, like we said, is called the Kesser of Chachma, the source from which Chachma flows. So the length of Chachma, to be able to bring it down, really has its source higher than the flash of Chachma itself. Its source is in the Kesser of Chachma, the nullification to receive. And through this power, it's an amazing thing he can accomplish. He can come up with new ideas that he didn't hear from his teacher because he's so nullified to the source of Chachma. If he only had the Chachma himself, he couldn't get new ideas. It would be the same old idea. But since he's completely nullified to be able to receive, therefore he can get new ideas. Furthermore, he'll be able to come up with new particulars in the explanation of the idea. He'll be able to explain the idea in new ways, which he didn't learn from his teacher. And that will enable him to widen the width of Bina. He'll be able to explain this idea in a very wide way, making a more detailed explanation even than he heard from his teacher. And all this is called a Navon, who understands a thing within a thing, because he's so nullified to be able to receive, he's able to bring it out into a revealed explanation. So far, we had the depth of Chachma and the width of Chachma and the length of Chachma. So before we go into the depth of Bina, should we have a niggun? Maybe Gedon wants to do his thing. How's that sound?
It sounds good.
Ask Gedon if he's ready.
Okay, 1 second. Let me call him. Gidon, are you ready?
Ready isn't going to be.
Okay, let's like the Baal something gesagt. Let's do this, baby.
All right. The song we'll be singing is Karibon, written by Rabbi Israel Najara, who was a Chacham from Tzefat in the 16th century. All right. The tune is written by Abi Rattenberg, who's from the 21st century. All right. Karibon Alam ve'olmayo Antu Malko Melech Malchayo Ovad Gevortech Ve'timhayo Shefo Kodamach Lehavayo Karibon Alam ve'olmayo Antu Malko Melech Malchayo Shevahin Asander Tzafra ve'ramsha L'chelah Kadisha Barak Kol Nafsha Irin Kadishin Uvnei Enosha Hevat Bara Ve'ofei Shemayo Karibon Allah Ve'olmayo Antu Malko Melech Malchayo Adilei Yikar Vuta Perot Yotanach Mipo Marivata Viapek Yotamech Migogaluta Amech Divachat Mikol Umayo Karibon Alam ביום היום unto מלכו מלך מלכיו למקדש כתוב ולקודש קודשים אתר די ביחדון וכין בנפשין ביזמרון לך שירין ורחשין בירושלם קרתה דשופריו קריבון עולם ביום היום unto מלכו מלך מלכיו.
Thank you, Gidon. Good job. Good job.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful niggun.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
A cappella, baby. Now, Gimel Ella. I just want to go over. We had the depth of Hakan, which is opening to receive, the nullification. And we had the width of Hakan, which is the actual idea that sparks into the brain. And we had the length of Hakan, the ability to be able to explain. Now we're starting with the explanation. And in that explanation called Bina, there's, guess what? A depth, a width, and a length. Are you surprised?
No, Bitzalel, I'm not surprised. Now, maybe I would be surprised. However, I remember that you said before, you can see my memory is now Viking.
You jogged your memory.
Clean like a vessel, that you said everything has a length, a width, and a depth.
Correct. So the explanation has a depth, width, and length, and we're going to start with the depth of the explanation, called the depth of Bina. Now, to understand the three levels of Bina, the depth and the width and the length of Bina, the depth, which is called Omek, we have a friend whose name is Omek. The depth of Bina is its essential unification with the idea it's explaining. Because there can't be an explanation without an idea it's explaining. So the explanation has to be connected to the idea, and that's called the depth of Bina. Like every depth that we said in the intellect has nothing for itself. It's just the point which connects the explanation of Bina to the Chachma, to the idea it's explaining. That's not hard, right? And that's the depth of Bina, how the explanation is connected to the idea it's explaining. It joins itself to the idea, to the Chachma, that it understands so totally that its only existence is the idea itself, to which it joins itself. And this is called the nothing of the something that Bina is, called the Omek HaMusag of Bina, the depth of Bina. Let me go over that. This depth of Bina is a nothing. In fact, that it's only a level that connects to the idea it's explaining. But it is a nothing of the tangible something of the explanation. It's not the same level of the nothing that the idea itself has, the flash. It's just the nothing of the something that Bina is. For example, if I explain something to you real good, Gimel Ella, and then I say, did you get the point? So the point is a kind of an unexplainable thing. It's really just connection to the idea that we're explaining. And that's the idea of this thing. It is the depth. It is a nothing, but it's a nothing of a tangible explanation.
Good point.
Good point.
So in other words, it's like if I have like the corner of the table and a corner of an Empire State Building, it's maybe not exactly the same thing, but they both are corner and they both like the
correct. All right, that's
They both did nothing, but one is on nothing of Chachma and one is on nothing of Bina. So it's not the same, but it's same.
Sounds good. This level will be understood by the example of a person who has a good brain of logic and understanding. But when he hears a thing explained at length, he only gets the logic of the explanation. He doesn't get the essence of the idea which is being explained. He doesn't grasp its depth. So even though he has all the words and letters of the long explanation, he's not animated from it. He has no Lebendigkeit in it. He's not excited by it. Why? Because he doesn't have the essence of the idea. He only has the words and letters of the explanation. Because the life juice, so to speak, flows in the essence of the idea, in the Chachma, called Chachma. Like it says, Chachma enlivens. So a person can memorize a discourse from a Rebbe word for word, and he's not excited by it because he's not connected to the godliness, which in the Chachma, in the idea itself, is the Or Ein Sof, is the godliness, and he's not connected to the godliness that are addressed in those letters of explanation. But the grasping of the idea itself, which is dressed in the letters and words of the explanation, that's called the depth of Bina. It's not a hard concept. Do you get what I'm saying? In other words, you have an explanation of this thing, but there's two ways. One is you can explain it where you're connected to the life force that's in it. You're connected to the godliness addressed in its explanation. And there's another way we're just saying the words and letters of the explanation. So the guy's just saying the words and letters of the explanation does not have the depth of Bina. The depth of Bina is where it's connected to the Chachma. And the Chachma is like an electric thing that's animated and alive. So if he's not connected, he knows all the letters of explanation, but it's a boring explanation. But if he has a grasp on the godliness that's dressed in these letters, then his explanation will be animated and lebendig. And this thing where the explanation is connected to the Chachma is the nullification of the understanding brain, which is the left brain, the Bina brain, to the Chachma brain, which is the right brain. So as soon as he hears the particulars from his teacher, his power of Chachma, realization of the godliness that's in the explanation, through his depth of the understanding, which is called the Omek HaMusag, the Keser Bina, he feels with his mind the point of the idea that reaches down to be dressed in the letters of the thought of the explanation, the thought of Bina. Therefore, he feels much life and enthusiasm for the point of the idea, which is dressed in this explanation. And this point of the explanation, which connects the explanation of the idea, it's explaining, is called the depth of Bina, the Omek of Bina. And it's called Keser of Bina, or the Omek HaMusag of Bina. Was that did you understand what I'm talking about here?
That makes sense. It's the Chachma. It's Keser connects to the Chachma generator, which is above it, and then the Bina connects to the Chachma, which is above it.
Right. So in the Chachma is dressed the godliness of the idea. And therefore, when the depth of Bina is connected to that godliness, it comes out into the explanation of Bina. Now, that's the depth of Bina, and the width of Bina is the revelation of the thought, that means the idea, as an explanation that exists. It's a tangible explanation, and it can be understood in words and letters. And that width of the Bina is called the Chachma of Bina, as opposed to the depth of Bina, which is called the Keser of Bina. which becomes a wide width through the addition of new details of the explanation. For example, Einstein had an intuitive flash, a chachma, that space and time are directly related. And the explanation of that intuitive flash, and the explanation is called the width of Bina, is E equals mc squared. It becomes explained in words and letters. So that will be the Bina of this intuitive flash that Einstein had, with all of its details, what's mass, what's energy, etc. But there is no length yet to bring it down. It's only wide. It's only details and explanation. You look at that equals mc squared. What the heck does that mean? It's the details of the explanation. But now you need metaphors to bring it down so it can be understood, which is called the length of Bina. And that's the ability to take an explanation to lower levels,
1 second.
explaining it through examples.
Bitzalel,
Until a little kid can understand it. And that's called Bina, the length of Bina.
Bitzalel.
Yeah?
So I just want to go over 1 second. The width, so just like the width of the Chachma is the actual idea, so the width of the explanation is like the actual explanation.
The actual details of explanation, correct.
Good. Okay, good. Let's go to the
Now,
line.
Einstein himself explained this theory of relativity.
I was there, you know.
Yeah. He explained it to a person who's in graduate school to be able to understand it. And he explained it in a very simple way with an example, with a metaphor. And he said, there's a train that's 20 feet high. And a person drops a rock from this moving train. And where that rock lands, its distance from the train can be measured in space. How many feet away from the train at the time when it hit? Or it can be measured in time. How many seconds will it take to reach the point where the rock was dropped, where the rock hit? So you see that space and time have a direct connection. So Einstein brought it down through these metaphors so that it can be understood by a regular person.
Bitzalel, what I'm understanding from his metaphor is you can measure the rock and you can measure its roll.
Rock and roll. Now, to understand these levels of Bina more clearly, we will use the example, now we're going to have a metaphor, of a river whose source is a spring. Right? The spring bubbles out from the earth, and as it bubbles out, it makes a river. Because Bina is like a river, the explanation is like a river, compared to Chachma, the idea, which is like a spring that feeds it. So Bina, the river, has a depth. And what's the depth of the river? It's the current of the river, which is the pushing out of the waters of the spring. And that has nothing for itself. It's only the spring waters that are pushing out. And that's called the depth of the river, where it's connected to the spring, the Chachma. The current, the depth of the river, is only the pushing out of the force of the spring which feeds it. The width of the river, however, which is the metaphor for Chachma Bina, the width of Bina, the details of the explanation, is how the water in bubbling out immediately spreads out to all sides close to its source, forming the banks of the river. And the object of the metaphor, how it is up there, the many details of the explanation. That's the width of Bina, the details of the explanation. The length of the river is how the river is drawn down far from its source, all the way to the delta, allowing the water to be available even to those miles away from the source. And that would be through the metaphors and the examples, that would be the length of Bina. Now, just like the metaphor of the river is the revealed explanation of the idea, which is the explanation of Bina, and like a river is a separate entity from the spring that feeds it, so too Bina is separate from the Chachma, but inside of itself is the idea, is the pushing of the water of the spring. That's the depth of the Bina. So even though it's separate from the idea, it explains, but of necessity, the Chachma, the idea itself, has to be dressed in explanation because you're explaining the idea. And that explanation becomes a garment for the Seichel itself, for the Chachma. In other words, the current of the river is the actual pushing out of the spring water. And the idea is dressed in it like a river is a separate entity from the spring, even though the river is composed of the spring water itself. That's what the river is. But when it's revealed that as a river, it's a different entity, it's a Bina, not a Chachma, than the spring, even though it is composed of and flows from the spring water. Are you okay with that, Gimel Aleph? What's the river? It's the water of the spring. Even though it's separate, it's a river, not a spring. It's a Bina, not a Chachma.
So in other words, just like a spring has a depth and a width and a length,
Yeah.
and out of the spring comes a river that also has a width
and a length.
to the spring, but this one is a spring and this one is a river, and they act differently.
But that river is really, the water in it is really the spring water. They're completely connected. It's not that they're separate, even though they're separate entities. The Bina is only an explanation of words of the idea of Chachma. And they're completely connected. They're called the two friends that are never separated. How do we do with a nigun? Do we have a nigun?
Yeah, that sounds good. It maybe make this so that they can see the Chevron.
Oh yeah. Hang it on. All right.
Okay, ready, Chevron?
Please.
Hey, I did it, I did it, I did it,
We like the way you sing. Chime in, please.
What happened?
I asked Fee to make sure he's going to do the harmony with us.
Okay. I was.
Svi, make sure or you're in big trouble.
All right.
Okay.
Better make sure.
I did it, 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 I
Okay, I guess I'm going to sign off now, unless you have, do you have an appeal you want to do?
I want to make an appeal.
Okay.
Mitzalel, as you know, we're now coming to the time to Reish Chodesh of the month, the first of the month of Av. And I want to say something. We know the famous Hasidic void about this, the vote. How do you say it?
Word?
A vote is like anyway.
Speech, address,
Yeah, it's a saying.
Saying.
That it says Mishanichnas Ov, when Ov comes in, Mematim Besimcha, which literally is taken to mean that we lessen the joy. But in Hasidus we say that not Mematim Besimcha, we lessen the joy. Mematim, we lessen how? Besimcha, with the joy. And this is very important because the whole thing of the whole reason that there's a certain sadness in Av is because this is when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. But this is not just when it was destroyed, as we know that in Av it was destroyed, and Av, God willing, this Av already it will be there. I say it be there because it should be in the last days of Tammuz already. We still have some time, a few hours in Tammuz. It should be in Tammuz still. But we should have the Beis Hamikdash again. And the main thing is that everybody should increase in the joy and the simcha of serving Hashem, and also increase in Avos Yisrael of loving everybody, to do a little more, to love all those people around you and to show it. So that's the bracha I want to give everybody. You should do this, and in this merit we should dance mit Moshiach Tzidkenu and bring sacrifices in the Beis Hamikdash, in the Holy Temple, the Torah Temple in Yerushalayim, our holy city now.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Gemara. Gezintahait, never kid. Gezintahait.